that's a good idea for a movie.
Yeah, everything, and it's very funny.
One thing I did not expect.
In 2022, Donald Sutherland was 87 years old and secretly dying. But he was still driving a car most people had never heard of. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't new. It was a Mercedes 450 SEL 6.9, and he had 5 of them stashed around the world. Why would a dying man need 5 cars? The answer goes back to the 1960s, a broken Ferrari, and a choice he made that cost him more than money. His son later said his father lived with regret his whole life. That car was part of it, and what he did at 87 was his final act of defiance. Donald McNichol Sutherland was born on July 17, 1935, in St. John, New Brunswick, right in the middle of the Great Depression. His father, Frederick, didn't just hold an ordinary job, he ran the town's gas, electricity, and bus services, which quietly placed the family in a decent middle-class position. His mother, Dorothy, taught mathematics, and Donald's grandfather had once been a church minister in Scotland. That mix of numbers, order, and old-world religion shaped the edges of his childhood. In the beginning, the family lived in a quiet farmhouse near the Kennebecassis River. Donald's first school was a tiny one-room building, and for a while, life felt small and slow. But when he turned 6, everything shifted. His father took a powerful role as vice president of the New Brunswick Power Company, and they moved back to the city, gaining a sharp step up in the world. When he was just 14, Donald's body collapsed under a storm of sickness. It wasn't just polio. It was rheumatic fever, scarlet fever, pneumonia, hepatitis, and spinal meningitis, all piling on at once. At one point, he actually died for a few seconds from the meningitis before being brought back. The illnesses left marks. One leg was forever shorter than the other. His childhood wasn't just a blur of hospital stays. It was a fight for survival. He didn't just come away with fear of needles. He came away with a hunger to escape into something bigger than his body. That's what led him to storytelling. By age 12, his family had moved to Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. School became something else entirely. At Bridgewater High, he became famous and slightly feared for his dead-on impressions of teachers, radio hosts, and politicians. When he got on stage, he wasn't just acting, he was dissecting. He turned The Mikado into a full-blown operetta and even directed shows himself while still in high school. The performances weren't for fun. They were his way of observing people, understanding them, even mocking them in ways that revealed something real. It wasn't always comfortable for the ones being mimicked. At 14, while still battling lingering weakness from polio, he took his first job at a local radio station. Not just reading news, he was doing interviews, announcing sports, even reading obituaries. He worked 25 hours a week for 35 cents an hour, while going to school full-time. On top of that, he delivered milk to 47 houses every morning for $12 a week, and in the summers, dug construction ditches in Halifax for the same 25 cents an hour, hauling dirt by hand. The work was hard, the pay was awful, and it taught him one thing clearly: physical labor wasn't going to be his future. That realization made acting feel like more than an escape. It was survival. Movies became his obsession. The Capitol Theatre showed British war films for 15 cents, and Donald would return to watch the same films again and again, especially anything with Humphrey Bogart. He memorized scenes, learned entire scripts, and started sketching actors' faces with perfect accuracy. He sold the sketches for 50 cents each, more than his radio job paid. One of his Bogart drawings even made it into a local newspaper. He wasn't just watching movies, he was studying them, seeing something in the characters he could become. In 1953, he entered the University of Toronto, majoring in engineering, not because he loved it, but because his father thought it would bring security. But then, as a dare, he auditioned for a play. It was the first one he'd ever seen. He landed the part. That single moment changed everything. From that point on, he juggled engineering classes with theater roles, including Shakespeare's The Tempest, and several touring productions with the Straw Hat Players. By the time he graduated, he held degrees in both engineering and drama. He walked away from the engineering job offers and their stable $15,000 salaries and chose the risk of acting. In 1957, he borrowed $250 from his mother, a massive sum at the time, and sailed to London to attend LAMDA. The money didn't last. He dropped out and took a low-paying job in a Scottish repertory theater, where he lived with other struggling actors and ate mostly tea, bread, and the occasional fish and chips. He lost 30 pounds during that stretch and played Hercules in a little-known play called The Rape of the Belt, performing in small towns across Scotland, where the audiences sometimes didn't even fill the front row. One of the lowest moments came in 1962. He auditioned for a film role and was sure he had it. The director, writer, and producer all loved him. But the next morning, they told him they didn't think he looked like someone who had ever lived next door to anyone. He had spent his last 10 pounds on shoes for that audition. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. The rejection nearly broke him. He wondered if he'd ever belong in Hollywood with his tall, angular frame and odd presence. He kept going. His first film credit came in The World 10 Times Over in 1963, but it was uncredited and paid only $25. Then came Castle of the Living Dead in 1964, where he played 3 roles, including one in drag. The movie was chaotic, underfunded, and mostly forgotten, but it was something. His next film, The Bedford Incident in 1965, placed him alongside Sidney Poitier and Richard Widmark in a serious Cold War thriller. For the first time, his presence actually mattered to the story. Then, in 1967, lightning struck. He had a tiny part in The Dirty Dozen. Just one line. But when another actor refused to do a comedic scene, director Robert Aldrich pointed at Sutherland and said, "You, with the big ears, you do it." Sutherland improvised, made the entire crew laugh, and caught the eye of producer Ingo Preminger. That moment directly led to his role in MASH. That film exploded, grossing over $81 million and winning the top prize at Cannes. But behind the scenes, the military hated it. The film's anti-war tone led to it being banned from military base theaters. Sutherland also clashed with director Robert Altman, who had tried to fire him, but the producer had refused. Sutherland never felt like he fit in on set. He didn't party with the crew. He didn't get the inside jokes. But on screen, he was magnetic. Throughout his career, Sutherland became known for his extreme physical transformations. He shaved his head for Fellini's Casanova, grew it out for other roles, bleached it for horror films, gained weight, changed his walk, adjusted his voice, whatever the role needed. He wasn't chasing vanity. He was chasing truth in performance. His hair became a kind of actor on its own, changing with each film, telling part of the story. He also fell in love. At Victoria College, he met Shirley Douglas, daughter of future Prime Minister Tommy Douglas. Their romance began in 1956 and eventually led to marriage. They rehearsed until sunrise, founded a radical theater group, and stirred controversy with anti-war performances that got them noticed by the authorities. His acting was never just acting, it was a kind of protest, a way to challenge systems and speak out, even when things went wrong, like the 1970 comedy Start the Revolution Without Me, which flopped badly. He kept moving forward. The movie failed at the box office during a tense political time and critics were disappointed, but it didn't slow him down. He had momentum now. Donald Sutherland's career in the 1970s wasn't just about fame. It was about fire, risk, heartbreak, scandal, and rebellion all tangled together. It started with Clute in 1971. He was already married, but filming with Jane Fonda at the Chelsea Hotel sparked something intense. He later described lying on a bed, watching her walk out of the bathroom naked in the moonlight. It wasn't just a scene, It became an 18-month affair. They were both already married. They went public when she won her Oscar, attending the 1972 Academy Awards together, and then it all collapsed in Tokyo. He said it broke his heart. But while their romance faded, their political bond didn't. That same year, they became the faces of America's anti-war celebrity movement. The FBI put them under surveillance. In Don't Look Now, 1973, he and Julie Christie filmed a love scene so raw, it triggered a censorship storm. American censors told director Nicholas Roeg that they couldn't show the rise and fall between thighs. So Roeg cut just 9 frames and edited the rest using fragmented cuts with dressing scenes. But rumors wouldn't stop. Years later, Variety's Peter Bart claimed he actually saw Sutherland having real sex with Christie on set. It didn't help that Warren Beatty, Christie's boyfriend, flew into London furious and tried to get the scene cut himself. By 1975, Sutherland played Homer Simpson, not the cartoon one, in The Day of the Locust, a lonely man who loses his mind and tramples a child to death during a riot. He was covered in blood, lifted by the crowd like a broken saint. People misread it, thinking he was some fascist symbol. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Ian Baruma later said that the performance hit harder years later, when people finally looked past the surface. But at the time, it was just too grim for a country celebrating its bicentennial. Then came 1900, Bertolucci's 5-hour epic in 1976. Sutherland played a fascist named Attila, who molests children, kills animals on screen, including a headbutt to a cat, and delivers a performance that critics called excessive and grotesque. He put on weight for the role and spoke in rural Italian dialects. The film nearly fell apart due to budget fights. Its politics were so far left, it frightened investors, and its sex scenes were so explicit, people walked out. Bertolucci didn't care. He kept rolling. That same year, the Eagle Has Landed almost killed Sutherland. During a scene involving an explosion, the blast went off wrong. His eyebrows were burned, he was shaken, but he kept going. He was playing an IRA assassin trying to kidnap Churchill. The film brushed against dangerous politics. At one point, Sutherland ad-libbed a line about Irish freedom that got censored. He had to redub lines because the British censors weren't happy. His personal life was collapsing at the same time. His marriage to Shirley Douglas ended in 1970, even though they had twins, Kiefer and Rachel, born in 1966. The Jane Fonda affair was the final blow. Shirley moved back to Canada with the kids in 1977. Before Shirley, he'd had a 6-year relationship with actress Brenda Vaccaro. His love life was as turbulent as his roles. And then came the FTA show, Free the Army. Though soldiers joked it meant Fought the Army. Sutherland and Fonda toured military bases doing anti-war performances. In coffeehouses near army camps, he read from Johnny Got His Gun, telling soldiers to resist orders. The FBI didn't just watch, they labeled him a communist sympathizer. Nixon's administration had the FTA documentary pulled from theaters. It got so bad, Sutherland received death threats and briefly fled to Canada for safety. While all this was happening, his health nearly gave out. During the filming of a project in the early 70s, he contracted spinal meningitis. It was life-threatening. The recovery was slow, the risk of long-term damage high. It forced him to rethink everything. How many risks were worth taking, what roles to accept, and whether his body could keep up with the intensity he brought to his work. He remarried in 1972, this time to Francine Rassett. They'd met on the set of Alien Thunder in 1974, which made the timeline weird. People whispered. They had 3 sons, named Rogue, Rossif, and Angus. Around Day of the Locust, rumors about Sutherland using cocaine and drinking heavily began to surface. People noticed changes in his behavior on set, fights with directors, slipping discipline. It was the 70s, Hollywood's cocaine years, but Francine stayed. He later credited her humor and intellect with keeping him grounded. The The FTA film resurfaced in 1972 and reignited threats. The documentary showed soldiers speaking out against the war. Real footage, real voices, real anger. Nixon hated it. The government considered it dangerous. Sutherland and Fonda had to hire private security. The FBI increased surveillance. It was one of the few protest films that truly rattled power. Then came Ordinary People in 1980, a quiet role, a grieving father, his most understated work, and the Academy didn't even nominate him. The film won Best Picture. Timothy Hutton won Best Supporting Actor at age 20. But Sutherland's deep, method-infused performance was ignored. He had poured everything in, even mining childhood trauma from his time in hospitals recovering from polio and rheumatic fever. He spent an entire school year bedridden once. The hurt showed. His later roles carried the same shadows. In JFK, 1991, his 10-minute monologue as Mr. X turned into one of the film's most quoted scenes. In Lockup, he played a prison warden so terrifying that Stallone later said the set felt haunted. The production had no script, just new pages daily, and still he delivered. In Threshold, 1981, he played a surgeon doing the first artificial heart transplant. He prepared like a real doctor, shadowed cardiac teams, and shot scenes using real hospital equipment. It brought back childhood memories of being stuck in a hospital bed. That performance won him Best Actor at Karlovy Vary. In Backdraft, he studied fire science to play a jailed arsonist. His character helped investigators understand that only a firefighter could cause the precise fire patterns. His screen time was short, but his menace left a mark. In The Rosary Murders, he became a priest bound by the confessional seal, forced to stay silent while a killer confessed. Raised Catholic, Sutherland knew that weight. He grew up in St. John, New Brunswick, often in hospitals, his mother guiding him through faith and guilt. That role hit close. It started with a letter, 3 pages long. Donald Sutherland wasn't even offered the role of President Snow in the Hunger Games when he wrote it, but he sent it anyway. In that letter, he dissected Snow like a scholar of evil. He compared him to real-world tyrants and even mentioned Ted Bundy, saying you should study Bundy's face before and after you knew what he did. That's how Sutherland saw Snow, not loud or monstrous, but calm, watchful, and always dangerous. He drew from his own role in Eye of the Needle, a film where silence was more terrifying than shouting. That letter didn't just win him the part, it changed the film. The director added 3 new rose garden scenes just for Snow, turning a man with 2 lines into the film's cold, breathing pulse. But Snow wasn't Sutherland's only brush with quiet terror. Back in 1995, he became General McClintock in Outbreak. That character didn't need metaphors. He was blunt force. He was the military's worst-case scenario with a voice. One of his lines still haunts, 2,600 dead or dying Americans. If that bug gets out, 260 million will be. That wasn't fiction. It felt like watching classified documents turned into dialogue. And it nearly was. Sutherland had studied real military men, the ones behind biological weapons programs. His research took him through declassified archives, cold memos, war logic. You could feel it in the scene where McClintock ordered the bombing of Cedar Creek, American civilians marked as expendable. Even Morgan Freeman later said the switch between Sutherland's warmth off-screen and his dead-eyed cruelty on camera was chilling. That same year, he became something entirely different. Colonel Mikhail Fetisov in Citizen X, a Soviet investigator. The film followed the real-life nightmare of Andrei Chikatilo, who murdered 52 people over 12 years. Sutherland didn't just show up. He dropped weight, learned Russian phrases, and read through KGB documents. His character fought not just a killer, but a system. In Soviet Russia, being a Communist Party member like Chikatilo made you untouchable. The case stalled because the state cared more about appearance than truth. Sutherland's performance wasn't loud or showy, it was a slow burn, the quiet frustration of a man who cared in a world that didn't. That role earned him an Emmy and a Golden Globe. He wasn't playing a hero, he was playing someone trying to be decent in a place that punished decency. Fast forward to the Italian Job in 2003. Sutherland played John Bridger, the mentor. He dies early in the film, but that scene wasn't just part of the script. It was his idea to shoot it first. He had a reason. Ever since a tumor scare in the 1970s, he'd lived with an awareness of death, and filming that moment was his way of facing it. They shot in Venice, using the exact places where the original Italian Job was conceived. That wasn't a coincidence. Sutherland wanted to connect past and present, not just in plot, but in memory. The handheld camera in his death scene wasn't stylistic, it was personal. It made the betrayal intimate. His character didn't just pass the torch, he made you feel what it means to leave unfinished business behind. Then came The Mechanic in 2011. He was 76. He played Harry McKenna, an old assassin in a wheelchair. But Sutherland wasn't just sitting still. He performed many of his own stunts, navigating tight spaces, dodging chaos. He was fragile but not broken. In one scene, his character maneuvers the wheelchair with an intensity that felt too real. That's because it was. He studied disabled veterans to get it right. He was acting through pain, real, physical, personal pain. But he kept going. That car chase scene through New Orleans? Sutherland was right there. It wasn't just about action. It was about showing that age didn't erase relevance. That even at 76, he could match the adrenaline of men half his age. Director Simon West said Sutherland's insistence on realism changed how they approached the entire film. Donald Sutherland's first marriage didn't just end. It collapsed under the weight of hunger, rejection, and cold London nights. He married Lois Hardwick in 1959, back when he was still just a broke drama student scraping his way through the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. She was a school teacher, but that didn't keep the lights on. When it all fell apart after 7 long years, he wasn't just heartbroken, he was broke, sleeping on friends' couches, counting coins to buy food. He hit a point so low that he had to call Christopher Plummer, a man he barely knew, to borrow $1,500 just so he could fly to America for a chance at Hollywood. In 1966, that was a fortune. It took him 2 years to pay it back, and the shame stayed longer than the debt. He later said he couldn't believe he made the call. That early pain, that hollow pride, followed him into every relationship after, always lurking, always pulling at the corners of his life. Then came Shirley Douglas. He married her in 1966, just as his career was starting to breathe. She was the daughter of a politician and a fierce activist, and by the end of that year, they had twins, Kiefer and Rachel. But the fire between them quickly turned to smoke. Donald was drinking heavily. The film sets became his escape, but his absence became her prison. When they split in 1970, the twins were barely toddlers. Shirley took them to Canada, and suddenly, Sutherland became a part-time father. Christmas visits, summer weeks, that was it. Kiefer said years later that he barely knew his dad until he was a teenager. And it showed. The damage wasn't loud, but it lingered. Years of missed birthdays and empty seats turned into decades of trying to patch something that never really formed in the first place. In 1972, he married Francine Rassett. This time it lasted 52 years until his death. They had 3 sons together, Roeg, Rossif, and Angus Redford. The names were odes to directors he admired, almost like a thank you letter built into his children's birth certificates. But even this long-lasting love wasn't without its cracks. Sutherland was always away. Macias H made him famous in 1970, but it also set the tone for the rest of his life. Work first, family later. He missed moments, important ones, the kind you can't replay. He admitted it himself in 2005, saying everything was his fault, that he was dumb. He wasn't cruel, just consumed. The industry had him, and he let it. Kiefer later echoed the pattern, saying again that holidays were the only real time they had. 5 kids, 3 marriages, one constant, distance. But not everything was sadness. He had obsessions that lit him up. One of them was cars, specifically Mercedes-Benz 450 SEL 6.9s. He didn't just buy one, He bought 5, all the same model, all for convenience. He wanted to know no matter where he was, a reliable car was waiting. And then there were the Ferraris. It started in the 60s when he bought a red 1968 Ferrari 275 GTB4 in Bologna. Just 2 days in, it broke down while he was driving through Yugoslavia. He had to ship it to the US to get it fixed. But even the Ferrari couldn't survive his divorce from Shirley. It wasn't her idea, it was his. At 6'4", he realized a 2-seater wasn't going to cut it if he wanted to drive his twins around during rare visits. So the Ferrari went. And so did another piece of freedom. As he aged, the body started breaking down. Arthritis, hearing loss, shattered shoulders from decades of death scenes where he refused to use his hands to break a fall. He said actors don't just die on camera, they crash, over and over. And the pain was real. Medical marijuana helped. He never shouted about it, but it worked. He kept acting into his 80s, even as his body begged him to stop. He said retirement meant death for an actor, and he meant it. He kept going. Hunger Games, press tours, long flights, memorizing lines with one ear working and joints screaming. But he didn't stop. His political fire never left either. In the 1970s, the government watched him closely. From 1971 to 1973, he was on the NSA's radar thanks to anti-war activism. He co-founded a group with Jane Fonda that toured military bases protesting the Vietnam War. They called it Free the Army. The military called it a threat. Sutherland called it necessary. The FBI labeled him a security risk. He wore it like a badge. In 2017, at age 82, the Academy finally gave him an honorary Oscar. Not for one film, for all of them. For everything he did when no one was watching, and everything he endured just to keep going. In his speech, he thanked the characters he played as if they were real people who carried him through life. He joked that he didn't deserve arthritis, and he didn't deserve the award either, but he did, every bit of it. He used his voice to do more than act. He narrated documentaries, lent his gravitas to serious causes. The Darfur genocide hit him hard. He gave his voice to Darfur Now in 2007. He didn't just show up to record. He believed in it. By then, the genocide had already displaced over 2.5 million people and killed hundreds of thousands. He made sure people knew. He wasn't loud about it, but he was firm. During the Hunger Games years, he mentored Jennifer Lawrence, sent her 50 films to study, treated her like family. She never forgot it. He didn't have to do it, but he did. Because when he wasn't consumed by work, he gave everything he had to people who needed it. And when he played President Snow, it wasn't just acting, it was a message. He wanted the young generation to understand power and how easily it could be abused. He even showed up in animation. The Simpsons, voiceovers, documentaries. His voice never aged the way his body did. It stayed powerful. It still held weight. He used it till the end. By 2020, while filming The Undoing with Nicole Kidman, he was already dying. Prostate cancer. COPD from smoking 4 packs a day for decades. He needed oxygen full-time. But he still worked, still memorized lines, still gave a performance that won him a Critics' Choice Award. His body was shutting down, but his spirit was stubborn. His last role came in 2023, Judge Isaac Parker in Lawman. Bass Reeves. It aired just 7 months before he died. He was 88. He filmed all 8 episodes in Texas while dragging around an oxygen tank most people never saw. But the fire never went out. He finished the role. He gave it everything. He died on June 20th, 2024 in Miami, just a few months before his memoir, Made Up But Still True, was supposed to come out. His son Kiefer said it best. He called his father one of the most important actors in film history, and the world agreed. Donald Sutherland made almost 200 films. He worked non-stop for 60 years, sometimes 6 movies in a single year. He never looked like the typical star, but maybe that's why we never forgot him. He was strange and brilliant. He never got a competitive Oscar nomination, but he didn't need it. He already carved his name deep into film history.